Howdy, friend. Spitz here, and this is Feed Bandit, the Texas First Outdoors podcast. If you have ever been walking through a thick live oak motte or sitting out on a lonely ridge just as the first cold wind of autumn starts to shake the acorns loose from the branches, you know that finding a truly mature white-tailed deer buck is one of the greatest riddles in the natural world. A lot of folks think that hunting deer is as simple as putting a bag of corn in a plastic spinning feeder, throwing up a tripod stand, and sitting back waiting for a trophy to walk out into the open pasture lane. But if you are chasing those old, wise phantoms of the brush, those giant bucks with thick necks, dark foreheads, and heavy, dark-stained antlers, you know they don't play by the rules of the young deer. A mature buck didn't get old by being stupid, and he certainly didn't get old by standing out in the middle of a clear shooting lane when the sun is high in the sky. He survives by understanding every single inch of his home range, and he spends his entire life using the thickest, nastiest habitat on the property, like an unbreakable fortress. If you want to consistently tag a legendary buck in our great state, you have to out-scout him long before the season ever begins. You have to learn how to look at a ranch not just as a pretty piece of country, but as a complex map of survival zones, travel corridors, and hidden kitchens. Today, we are going to dive deep into the world of advanced whitetail scouting. We will talk about what makes a piece of woods a premier deer habitat, how these animals use the terrain to hide their movements from humans, and the exact step-by-step technical tips, mapping skills, and habitat secrets you need to read the landscape like a master frontier scout and position your stands exactly where the king of the brush is going to step out. So, pull up a chair. We have a lot of country to cover. To understand advanced whitetail scouting, you have to train your eyes to see the woods from the physical perspective of the deer. White-tailed deer are ultimate creatures of the edge, which means their entire life is built around transitions. They do not like to spend their time out in the middle of massive, wide-open agricultural fields where a hawk or a hunter can spot them from a mile away. And they do not like to sit in the middle of dark, barren forests, where the canopy blocks the sun and stops any good food from growing on the ground. They want to live right where the thickest cover meets the open openings, utilizing the interface between different types of vegetation to stay safe and full of food. A mature buck has a very small core area, often less than a few hundred acres, where he feels completely secure. Inside that small boundary, he maps out his daily routine with ultimate precision. He chooses his bedding spots based entirely on the wind currents and the density of the brush, ensuring that he can always smell anything approaching from behind him, while using his eyes to monitor the open ground ahead. If you want to find his hidden domain, you cannot simply look for tracks along the main dirt roads where everyone drives their trucks. You have to lace up your boots, pack a heavy water bottle, and head deep into the rugged cuts, the dry creek draws, and the dense briar patches where the average hunter is too lazy to walk. You have to look for the subtle signs of long-term occupation, the old, healed-over rubs on thick cedar trunks, the faint paths padded down into the hard clay by years of heavy hooves, and the hidden structural funnels where the land forces the deer to walk through a narrow gate. Matching your mind to the instincts of the deer is the absolute foundation of advanced woodcraft. Let's do a technical deep dive into the exact scouting strategies, habitat markers, and mapping tips required to locate the best whitetail holding cover on your property. My first big tip for you is to utilize modern satellite mapping applications to identify the primary security structure before you ever step foot on the dirt. Open up your map app and look for the darkest, thickest, and most solid patches of woody cover on the entire ranch. In Texas, this means looking for massive cedar breaks, dense mesquite thickets, or old tangled briar draws along the low creek channels. Mark these zones on your map as absolute sanctuary blocks. A mature buck will use these specific thickets as his bedroom, entering them long before the sun cracks the eastern horizon and staying tucked inside the shadows until the last 5 minutes of legal daylight. Once you have located these core bedrooms, look for the natural travel lanes, called funnels or pinch points, that connect them to the major food sources. A funnel can be a narrow strip of timber running between two open coastal grass pastures, a shallow saddle crossing between two steep limestone hills, or a dry creek bed that cuts through a high ridge. These narrow strips of brush are the ultimate highway systems for deer because they allow a buck to travel across the property while keeping his body completely hidden inside the branches. Place your scouting focus right inside these narrow bottlenecks because that is where the deer are forced to pack together into a tight lane. My second tip is to learn how to evaluate the local food lines based on the native plant selection of the current season. A lot of folks think that deer only eat grass, but the biological reality is that white-tailed deer are high-quality browsers, meaning they prefer to eat the tender leaves, buds, and fruits of woody plants and wild weeds. In the early autumn months, the absolute number one food source across the state of Texas is the native acorn crop, especially from live oaks, post oaks, and white oaks. When the acorns start dropping from the canopy, deer will completely abandon the commercial feeders and food plots to feast on this high-fat, high-energy natural candy. Walk the edges of your timber mottes and inspect the ground under the oak trees. Look for caps that have been chewed off, freshly turned leaves where deer have been rooting through the grass for fallen nuts, and large piles of fresh deer sign. If you find an isolated oak tree that is dropping heavy, sweet acorns right between a core bedding thicket and a water source, you have located a gold mine. Mark that tree as a primary evening hunting spot because every deer in the county will pattern themselves around that natural buffet until the acorns are completely gone. My third tip is to map out the secret, low-profile water crossings and hidden water resources on the property. While deer get a massive amount of their daily moisture from the green leaves they chew on, a big mature buck still needs to drink fresh water every single day, especially during the dry, dusty months of the late summer and early autumn. He will avoid the large, wide-open stock tanks where the cattle gather and the ranch trucks drive past, preferring instead to look for a quiet, hidden water hole buried deep inside the brush. Look for tiny, seasonal dirt potholes, hidden tenajas along rocky creek beds, or leaks along remote windmill overflow pipes. Walk these hidden water margins carefully and inspect the soft mud for deep, heavy tracks. A mature buck track will be noticeably larger and wider than a doe track, often measuring over 2.5 inches long, with blunt, rounded tips at the front of the toes and deep dew claw impressions pressed into the mud at the back of the heel. If you find large, lone tracks coming down a single trail to a hidden mud hole, you have found the private drinking station of an old king of the woods. My fourth tip is to deploy high-quality trail cameras along your newly discovered funnel lanes with absolute stealth and minimal human intrusion. Technology is a fantastic asset for advanced scouting, but if you run into the woods every 3 days to pull the memory cards from your cameras, you will leave a heavy trail of human scent, broken sticks, and matching noise that will alert every mature buck in the area. The deer will quickly realize they are being watched, and they will shift their core bedding areas onto the neighboring ranch before the season ever opens. Use advanced cellular trail cameras that transmit the photographs straight to your mobile phone via the satellite network, allowing you to monitor the movements of the herd without ever stepping foot inside their sanctuary. Position your cameras facing directly north or south along the edges of the narrow funnel trails, hanging them about 4 to 5 feet high on a sturdy tree trunk, so the bright flash of the camera lens doesn't stare straight into the deer's eyes and scare them in the dark. Advanced scouting and habitat evaluation are the premier components of our outdoor tradition because they celebrate the true essence of sportsmanship and independent wood scouting. It changes the game from a matter of luck or financial position into a beautiful contest of wit, patience, and deep knowledge between the hunter and the wild target. Preserving the tradition means looking at our hunting lands with a spirit of gratitude and ultimate responsibility, understanding that our job is to be wise stewards of the soil, the water, and the vegetation that keeps our deer herds healthy and strong year after year. Protecting the legacy means passing down these essential mapping, tracking, and plant identification skills to our children, showing them that being a true Texian outdoorsman means taking pride in the hard work of the off-season and honoring the wildlife through disciplined preparation. There is an incredible sense of pride that comes from spending months studying the maps, walking the rocky draws, finding that one secret funnel, and finally watching a legendary brush buck step out into the red dirt right where you predicted he would be. It is an honest, clean, and hard-earned victory that connects you directly to the ancient spirit of our frontier ancestors. Learn the layout of your wild country and scout with true honor under the Texas sky. So what do you think of that? Are we right on target, or did we totally miss the boat on that one? Email us at howdy@feedbandit.com and let us know either way. And don't forget to check us out at feedbandit.com and grab some gear to show off your Texas First Outdoors pride. Preserve the tradition, protect the legacy, and remember, always support your local feed store. If you're there for them, they'll be there for you when you need them the most out in the field. Stand tall, fellow Texian. We'll talk soon.